All right, welcome back to another session of Heart to Heart. Columbus Batiste here, in case you did not know. And today is one of the days in October. Come on now. And so in October, what do we have to rep? We have to rep it's Women's Health Month. It is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And so as a cardiologist, I have to rep always heart disease, but also intermingle between that, we have as far as the pink ribbon. So today we have a special guest with us that I am excited to bring on board, right? And so this is my colleague, friend, Dr. Shani Porter. She is a practicing OBGYN. She's an advocate. She's a speaker. She's an educator. And here's the thing that I love right here in the field of integrative medicine. So she has combined her expertise as a conventional OBGYN, which means she does traditional medicine, but also with her in-depth knowledge of holistic treatment options for women throughout all the reproductive stages. So this is a session you definitely do not want to miss. I'm saying for the men, for the women, for the people who love women, you need to attend this. Share it, click like, and share this out with people. So Dr. Porter's approach, it involves attentively listening. I'm sitting here stuttering because I'm so excited about this stuff, to patient stories in order to determine what steps are necessary to restore their health. Determine the underlying cause of the condition, right? So she's not just trying to treat, she's trying to get to the root cause and devise a treatment plan that will enable the body to recover holistically. Come on, she's speaking my language, somebody. Through a comprehensive comprehension of the relationship between the mind, body, and spirit, as well as the significance of food as medicine. Right? Food as medicine. Dr. Porter empowers women by recommending actions that enable them to take control of their health and attain optimal wellness. Come on now. Welcome to the stage, Dr. Shani Porter. Say hello there, young lady.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was a great introduction. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now, you guys are used to just one-on-one. It's heart to heart, but today we have an additional guest. I felt it was a little bit, I may be suffering a little bit for me to go ahead and have this conversation by myself. So I decided to bring on a young lady by the name of Danette Batiste. Some of you on other podcasts I've done may remember her. She is the CEO of Healthy Heart Nation. She is an executive. She is a mother, a daughter. She is a sister, and she is an advocate for those who are at risk. Welcome to the stage there, Miss Danette.
Thank you. It's a
All
pleasure
right.
to be here.
Man, it's so good. It's so good to have both of you here on today. All right, so Dr. Porter, tell me what's new in life. We were kind of chatting backstage, and before we kind of dive into what everyone wants to hear, I was amazed, man. You have basically a D1 athlete.
I do.
And wait a minute, y'all, you don't understand. She has a D1 athlete whose team just took down prime time. Took down prime time. Ridiculous. Now, I have to say I've been supporting prime time, and your team took them out. Tell us about that.
I mean, they have a great team, and Deion Sanders, everyone knows, Hall of Fame, great athlete, much respect. But it definitely felt good to go into Colorado and beat them.
Wow. What you guys say? What team does your son play for?
Stanford.
Stanford.
Stanford,
All right.
yeah.
So not only is he athletically inclined, he is an intelligent individual as well.
He is.
Mhm.
All right.
Thankfully.
All
So
right.
thankful.
Well, last question about that. Where did he get his athleticism from? You or his father?
I think it's a combination. I'm going to give us both credit on that. I
All
think
right.
I happened to see a video of my husband playing football when he was in high school. He was really
Nice.
good. He was really good. So.
Okay.
I love that support. That's all right. That's all right. All right. Let's kick this off. So breast cancer awareness. Let's start there. But I'll be honest. There's a lot of questions. I've been getting a lot of questions. I put some feelers out there, and a lot of folks had questions about menopause. We're going to touch folks on menopause. We're going to touch on breast cancer. We're going to talk about the role of stress, all
Mhm.
of these different things that are there. But let's kick it off with breast cancer. Danette, now I know breast cancer is close to you, that you had family members with breast cancer in the past. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My father's sister had breast cancer, and my mother's sister had breast cancer, and so just having those diagnoses in our family, after I delivered my daughter, whenever there was a lump, we were definitely ultra, concerned about it. And so
Mhm.
I remember when I was, breastfeeding, and I'd noticed a lump in my breast when I shortly after I had my daughter, and so the fear that comes into play in that, and it just happened to be a clogged milk duct, but I am, as they call cysty,
Mhm.
but I don't take it, for granted whenever I do, recognize or feel any kind of lumps. We definitely take the precautions to go get seen. And, there's always that relief when you find out that there's nothing wrong. But just having the thought of it really just takes you into a different place mentally when you start to really think about your mortality. So it's a challenge, but luckily I've been on the positive end of those types of things. But I know a lot of women are not, and so it's something you're always still very concerned with.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. It's important. I
So,
think
Dr. Corey,
awareness.
tell us about breast cancer.
So, unfortunately, it's one of the number one cancers in women, and it does receive a lot of attention, but not everyone is clear, for example, on even how to be screened for breast cancer. And part of it is that there are different recommendations depending on which organization, you look at. So, the United States Preventative Task Force says to start at 50, whereas the American Cancer Society says to start at 45. And part of
Okay.
it has to do with what the mammogram is doing for that patient and whether or not it's decreasing morbidity or mortality. So death
Okay.
from, the breast cancer or the type of surgery that you would need. And so it can just be very, very confusing for a lot of women in general in terms of the screening. The biggest recommendation currently really is breast awareness. So really being aware of your breast. If you do notice a lump, if you notice the lump, don't ignore it. Definitely come in to be evaluated. I still recommend just doing self breast exams on yourself, although that's sort of falling out of favor from recommendations, only because
Mhm.
the thought is that you might think something's abnormal that really isn't. And so you may undergo unnecessary tests and anxiety that go along with it. But I do feel there's something to be said about knowing your own breast and recognizing, when something may not be quite right.
Wow.
And as a Black woman, I mean, is the recommendation, to be more aware of it or more cautious, or, are a lot of our diagnoses just kind of dismissed?
So, because of the increased mortality that exists with Black women with breast cancer, I think there should be a heightened sense of awareness. The recommendations aren't any different. Interestingly, the incidence of breast cancer is not higher in us, but we're more likely to have the more aggressive breast cancer if we do have breast cancer. So the
Okay.
mortality is something like 33% higher in Black women. So we definitely need to be aware.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. I mean, is that genetic? Is it social determinants of health? What do you think the real reason is why there's these disparities in terms of outcomes and then diagnoses?
So, one thing that's noted is the type of breast cancer. So, you have the estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor positive type breast cancers. We happen to get the non hormonal sensitive breast cancers, unfortunately. And when you look at a lot of the conditions that do impact us more, like fibroids, for example, there does seem to be some impact on the social determinants of health for sure. I think across the board. So you talk about stress, you talk about potential environmental exposures, that are increasing inflammation in our body, potentially impacting our immune system. It exposes us to more conditions that have a proliferative effect, like cancer, like fibroids. So yeah, I don't know that it's been delineated exactly what are the direct causes,
Hmm.
but just based on what I know and how we're impacted by fibroids in particular, that comes to mind. There definitely does seem to be impact from the social determinants of health and how it impacts our health.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it seems like people can't escape. I was reading one article kind of in prep. I had to make sure when I have extremely intelligent people who join in the area I don't practice in, I have to do a little research. And so I was looking at some of the stuff and the weathering effect from allostatic load. And
Mhm.
some authors, some research authors were intimating that there could be a relationship in terms of it, but very nebulous as it relates to specifics with stress. I've seen aspects with racism. And I've seen actually, which was crazy. I didn't think it, but everything is showing out is that historical redlining. That when you overlay those similar areas, that it shows a heightened risk of breast cancer inside the same areas where they were redlining. So
Mhm.
it's very interesting, but it's a major issue, obviously, with us all.
Absolutely. And allostatic load, it's interesting you mentioned that topic. So that has major impacts also on our health, because it's basically draining our system of nutrients as we kind of try to hold up all these balls that we have to carry and endure all of these um, aggressions that we're, exposed to daily. It definitely has a detrimental impact on our health. Some that you can't quite measure, except when you look at the outcomes that do impact us more.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it seems, I mean, I guess it can get a bit overwhelming, a bit depressing for people
Mhm.
of kind of hearing about all of the tremendous risk and what they're confronted with. So let's kind of dig into some other, like maybe causes that are controllable,
Mhm.
in terms of things that environmental causes and things of that
Mhm.
nature. I mean, what role does nutrition play in terms of breast cancer development or in prevention and or things like alcohol? Let's start with
Mhm.
alcohol first.
Yeah, alcohol is definitely huge. So alcohol is technically a carcinogen. So it's a toxin, even though we don't think of it that way. And one of its metabolites actually damages our genes. So it impacts DNA synthesis, DNA repair, and anything that impacts the repair of our DNA has downstream effects that can lead to cancer. So alcohol is huge. The other thing with alcohol is that it potentially impacts the metabolism of our estrogen. So some of the same pathways that estrogen goes through in the liver, alcohol does as well. And so, having drinking alcohol potentially is going to increase risk of estrogen as there's a impact on how we're metabolizing that estrogen, for example. So those are the two major components that are involved with alcohol and how it impacts breast cancer.
Oh, wow. Wow. So when you have a patient who comes to you and they're afraid of a risk for developing breast cancer, and they ask you, Doc, so should I drink? Just tell me straight up. Should I drink alcohol? Can I drink alcohol or can I not?
So, it's difficult to tell someone just don't drink alcohol. I don't think that's a realistic answer, but you really want to try to limit the amount of alcohol. And the problem is we don't know, everyone's so different, how well your liver does detox whatever you're exposed to in the environment, for example. That's going to play a role. The stress, the inflammation, that all plays a role. So that's why you can't tell someone directly zero alcohol, but you really definitely want to minimize alcohol intake. Unfortunately, not a fun answer, but it's just reality.
That's right. That's right. So I mean, so in terms of stories with your internet, I don't know your thoughts. Jump in as we're kind of having this. This is a conversation right now. We're sitting around. You have the opportunity to have what's who's becoming a world-renowned OBGYN integrative medicine here at your disposal too as well. So jump in whenever you want.
Absolutely. I didn't know how hard we were going to make her work tonight. I just wasn't sure.
We listen, after she took down Dion, I got a little text from him saying, bruh, make sure you put the work in on her tonight because her son put some work in on us.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
but but now so but when we look holistically in terms of before we get to some of the traditional treatments of what people have to go through, in terms of recommendation of should they get the BRCA gene, all these other, we'll touch on that in just a few moments. But before we do that, let's look kind of continue down the holistic pathway, about exercise or sleep. We talked about alcohol, we talked about
Mhm.
stress. What role, if any, do they play in the recovery and or prevention in terms of being active, just moving, just trying to make sure we get sleep? And that
Yeah.
can be a fine line, especially when we get to the next phase of the conversation of menopause.
Right. No, lifestyle and healthy choices are extremely important in breast cancer prevention, as well as, someone who's dealing with breast cancer. So,
Mhm.
two key preventative strategies to prevent breast cancer are being active and
Mhm.
not gaining weight, ideally in the postmenopausal phase. They found that postmenopausal obesity can increase your risk of breast cancer, unfortunately. So exercise, it's going to obviously improve your weight, but it also can improve your immune system, also improve your mood as well. They found that in breast cancer survivors, if you walk 2 to 3 hours per week, you actually decrease your mortality by about 45% compared to
Mhm.
women who were sedentary.
Mhm.
So, physical activity is very important. And then food is very important. Food is medicine. I strongly believe that. So, you want to eat a diet similar to an anti inflammatory diet. So, lots of, healthy green vegetables and fruits, cold water fish like wild caught salmon, olive oil, nuts, beans, really avoiding what we call the Western diet, so a lot of
Mhm.
animal fats, alcohol, unfortunately, greasy foods. They've done studies comparing the two, and there definitely is a decreased risk of breast cancer when you're following an anti inflammatory diet. And specifically, eating vegetables like cruciferous vegetables, that would be like broccoli and your kale, because they can help with estrogen metabolism, for example. So, when estrogen gets metabolized, it can metabolize into different forms of estrogen. And so metabolizing your estrogen into the weaker estrogens is ideal. And eating these types of vegetables can increase that. There's also studies looking at vegetables high in carotenoids like pumpkin and broccoli that increase estrogen. I think it was the estrogen receptor negative breast cancers, actually. So, food is really literally medicine. And when you do eat your vegetables, you want to ideally eat more organic vegetables and fruits. One, because the pesticides can have negative impacts on our hormones. So they can be like endocrine disruptors. The other
Mhm.
thing is that an organic vegetable is essentially stronger. It has more nutrients in it than a vegetable that's been protected by those pesticides. So when they survive being out in the environment without the pesticides, they're essentially going to be making more nutrients. The nutrients that they make protect themselves. And so we benefit when we eat them. So we're getting more of those nutrients that we want from those, said vegetables. So it's just amazing when I learned all of this, in terms of food. I'm like, why didn't I know this before? It's fascinating. And it's also extremely empowering.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing you mentioned, so sleep. Sleep is very important. So melatonin, which is that sleep hormone, is actually anti-estrogenic. And so there's actually studies looking at night shift workers. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, if you do night shift work, there is an increased risk of breast cancer,
Mm.
potentially because, all the fluorescent lights that are around, maybe in the
Mm.
hospital, it lowers your melatonin levels. So that's going to potentially increase your estrogen levels. So lifestyle is extremely, extremely important.
No, I love it. You're speaking my language now, singing the
Mhm.
song of my life. When we talk about nutrition and food,
Mhm.
just to kind of just accentuate what you mentioned there. I mean, in case y'all didn't catch it, when we talk about cruciferous vegetables, this is like really the moneymaker. When you're looking at kale and broccoli and cauliflower and all the wonderful things that they can contain. But here's one of the key things too, as well, right? So this is the time I can actually spread a little, add something to like your knowledge you drop to, as well as if when you don't cut off the tops of your carrots and of your beets, that is one of the most nutrient dense portions of your vegetables. Cook those bad boys up, because what you're doing is they're going to give some anti-cancer effects that are there. They're extremely beneficial. Then when you add in things like your soy, all right, and the genistein that comes from that to prevent anti-angiogenesis, which means prevention of all the pruning of blood vessels that feed cancer cells. It helps to prevent them. Mushrooms adds the vitamin D. They've been showing some small studies too as well to really help offset cancer. And then when we're looking at the beautiful things that I love, which are really your allium family, your onions and
Mhm.
garlic, or as Emerald Lagasse used to say, onions, right? And you get those things. They have antiplatelet effects, and they also help detoxify some of the carcinogens. and getting your omegas. Now and you mentioned trying to get omegas, and flax and chias are great sources. So plant-based sources for this in terms of whole foods are
Mhm.
extremely important. I think when you start to really realize that, what am I feeding my body towards a healthful state or not, that can be a game changer in the process of what you want there. So that's wonderful. I love it. I love it. How receptive are your patients to this when you drop this knowledge on them?
It's a tough. Well, I don't know. It's I think most patients are empowered. They're like, really, really. Now, it's one thing to hear the information and believe it, but it's another thing to implement it in your daily lives. And just speaking personally, and my family, they're kind of tired of me when getting on my soapbox, but it's slowly starting to sink in. It's definitely challenging when you are very busy too. Living a busy lifestyle, you have to plan out these things because you can be hijacked. You didn't
Right.
make your meals for the day. You go out and you're just sort of, have to do what
Hungry.
is available to you.
Yeah.
You're hungry, right? And you're like, okay, I'm just going to do it this time, right? But um, yeah, planning things out, making good choices, not falling under peer pressure at the meetings at work and things like that. And the more you do it, the stronger you get. That willpower does stronger. Speaking of meetings and donuts, sugar. So sugar is huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sugar is inflammatory, increases insulin levels. And one thing I just actually learned was that insulin increases the aromatase enzyme. Now, aromatase, it converts testosterone to estrogen. And when we
Okay.
have more insulin, so insulin resistance, you're actually increasing that aromatase activity. Adipose also, being obese, this is part of the reason why obesity can have negative impacts on cancer, breast cancer, because of the increased estrogen. So the adipose tissue has this aromatase enzyme, so it's converting testosterone into estrogen as well. And one other thing about sugar. So cancer cells have a switch in their metabolism, and they actually prefer sugar. So when we eat sugar, synthetic sugar especially, we're essentially feeding the cancer cells.
Wow.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have a close friend of mine who was diagnosed with breast cancer in her late 30s, African American, and she totally changed her diet. I mean, she went vegan, she cut out sugar, she doesn't drink alcohol, and she's a survivor,
It's
and she,
fantastic.
yeah, it's wonderful, great willpower. There's something else I wanted to say about sugar. I think that was the main. Oh, exercise. So bringing it back to exercise. So exercise also increases blood vessels, perfusion and so it's going against that acidic environment that the cancer cells like, and bringing in more oxygen and more nutrients to help fight cancer. So another win-win with your exercise.
And you mentioned that you wish you had known this all along. How long have you been on this path?
So I've been practicing for 13 years now. Well, yeah, I've been at my current job for 13 years. And I became board certified in integrative medicine this year in May.
Okay.
So
Okay.
my fellowship was 2 years, and
Hmm.
then did my board certification this year.
Okay. And did you join? Were you in the life before you decided that you wanted to practice the life,
The
the
in
vegan life, and
Oh,
the
vegan
or
life.
the plant
Oh,
based and all that good stuff?
I'm not plant based. I'm more of an
Okay.
anti-inflammatory diet. Yes.
Okay. Got it.
I've
Okay.
dabbled in being vegan, doing fasting,
Hmm.
for different reasons, but
Okay.
it can't do that. But anti-inflammatory, I would say plant-based, plant-forward, and trying to eat
Yes.
more
Okay.
fish in my diet. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and it's
No, that makes sense.
yeah.
And for those of you out there listening, and so probably the majority of my listeners who join me are predominantly plant based. Here's one of the key things when we look at it, right? So it's you have to look at the journey and where we're moving from. We're moving from an ultra processed standard American diet, and what we're doing is we're cutting out this stuff that is a deadly killer, of the
Hmm.
white flour, of the sugar, of the salt, of the processed foods that can survive a Holocaust, right? And what we're doing is we're replacing that with foods from the ground, foods that are made, plants from the ground, as opposed to foods
Hmm.
made in a plant. And so in this process, what we're doing is we're really providing the body with everything it needs in order to thrive and survive. And that's really what we're talking about here today, is about how can we make these steps. Every step in the right direction is a movement towards wellness. And that's empowering for you, not to realize that your sole existence isn't reliant upon someone wearing a white coat. Man, that just the amount of what you choose with your fork has so much power. That's huge. And so I applaud you, especially what sounds
Mhm.
like really basically almost mid-career of really changing the turning the corner and saying, you know what, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. But
Definitely.
dig into that a bit more. So you touched on it, but I mean, so what was your why? What was your why? What made you detour? Right? I mean, because it's pretty comfortable. You're doing what you do, you're at top of your profession. Why detour and go back and have to start studying and go down this road?
Well, one, I recognized that there was just something missing in what I was offering to my patients.
Okay.
I would also have patients come in and ask me, well, can I try, magnesium for my menstrual cramps, for example? And I very humbly would say, well, it probably wouldn't hurt. But the truth was, I didn't know. And, I
Mhm.
didn't like not knowing. But it also, I've always been more of a natural person. I
Mhm.
really like taking medications. I also noticed as a OBGYN, I'm a surgeon. And I noticed that there were certain patients that I can almost predict who were going to have better outcomes based on their mindset. So just
Mhm.
recognizing that there's something more between my patients and I other than what's being said. It's also
Yes.
what is their mindset, and are they optimistic? Are they pessimistic? Because it impacts their healing. So just understanding
Mhm.
what is involved with how we heal. It's more than a prescription medication that I can give you. It's even more than the surgery that I perform. It's everything in
Mhm.
between. And so really wanting to understand more about the root cause of medicine, more about other whole medical systems like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and how these medical systems helped to take care of patients for so many years and still do so today, and recognizing that even Western medicine is one of the newest forms of medicine. But I think there's a place for it all, and I wanted to be a part of it.
I love it. I
So
love it.
faith and belief make a difference in terms of, and family support. I would assume that that also has a
Absolutely.
lot to do with that too. Okay.
Right. Yes. And that's part of the pillars of health that I try to
Mhm.
promote too. So it's nutrition, movement, spirituality, community relationships, sleep, all of these basic things that we sort of ignore, and we try to put band-aids on everything to fix ourselves when we really need to just take a step back and look at
Right.
how am I taking care of myself? Fundamentally, am I getting enough sleep, and really acknowledging the importance of that. And I think patients need to hear that from us, that no,
Mhm.
you need to sleep. um, you're not going to be okay with 5 hours of sleep, right? So before I give you this hormone, let's work on your sleep. So things like that can be
Mhm.
profound and life changing, and maybe they won't meet me, and and that's okay.
Well, that's huge. I mean, I've been so intrigued with the research surrounding belief and characterized around the placebo effect. And what I tell patients when I speak to them is that you understand that the placebo effect is not what you think. I mean, so placebo effect, we always think of it as this innate inorganic substance that we're matching against our powerful medications.
Hmm.
That's not the case.
Mhm.
What the docs and the scientists are testing is they're testing their therapy versus your mind, your
Mhm.
belief system. They're
Mhm.
challenging you. And so these pills have to beat your belief system to even prove their worthiness.
Yep.
But where we're losing the whole mark is that it's a combination of both in some instances, and others we're minimizing the things that we don't know. That old adage that everything that counts can't be counted, right? I mean, so just because we can't really count the impact of belief doesn't mean it does not count. And it's so powerful. A lot of research happening out of Stanford with Dr. Leah Crum, and she's done
Mhm.
tremendous work looking at some of the roles in the belief system, whether or not it's from a shot, whether or not it's from belief in weight loss based on activity or based upon the food substances that one is eating. And
Mhm.
so it's incredible. It's incredible. So bravo, bravo. I think that's so important, is to instill faith and hope in the people,
Hmm.
mixed in with reality, but it still is never taking away hope and belief. It's so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. So before we transition, do you want to say anything about traditional medicine therapies for breast cancer? Or you want to leave that to their docs? Anything you want to know, Danette, with that?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think with regard to breast cancer, I would definitely recommend that patients follow what their surgeons recommend, follow what their hematology oncologist recommends. There is a place for integrative oncology. I don't practice integrative oncology, but there are integrative oncologists out there. So I think it would be a nice adjunct to whatever their conventional therapies are. And again, emphasizing, please do the conventional, but you can also follow along with the integrative, which often includes, balancing your hormones, the lifestyle pillars of health, a lot of what we talked about, but really emphasizing that as part of the treatment plan. So,
All right, so I'm gonna throw something at you that I probably didn't even prime you that I was going to, just because it's something that I've seen a lot of people ask about, which is fibroids.
mm,
And so, I mean, fibroids is a major issue, especially in the African American community.
yeah.
Tell me about fibroids. What can people do naturally to help them with fibroids, or is surgery or injections the only option?
No, I love this question. It's one of the things that I'm educating myself on more and more, not from a convention. I mean, I know what there is about convention, but what I'm recognizing is the missed opportunity that there is when we see a woman that has fibroids that may be only 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, uh, from my traditional training, we'd say that's really not a major issue, especially if it's in the muscle of the uterus as opposed to the cavity. So don't worry about it. But if you get a problem, come back and see me. Well, I think that's a time to actually acknowledge that there's a systemic issue going on in their body, and let's try to handle it. So, a few things in mind. So, number one, insulin. Insulin is everywhere. And when we think of insulin and diabetes, insulin has
Hmm.
impact on so many aspects of our health, including fibroids.
Okay.
So it's inflammatory, it's growth factor. So controlling blood sugar is extremely important when it comes to fibroids. Managing stress. There is a physician out of University of Chicago, Dr. Al Hindi, and he actually has done a lot of research looking at fibroids, not only from a tertiary treatment, meaning that you have these huge fibroids, you need to manage them, but more primary, so preventing them, and then even secondary, as I'm speaking of the smaller ones that typically aren't treated. And one thing he's found is that vitamin D deficiency has a link to uterine fibroid growth.
Okay.
Vitamin D is actually a hormone, and it's involved in inflammation, it's involved in appropriate cell death. So cells are they need to die under certain circumstances, right? If they're damaged,
Hmm.
whatnot, they need to die. And when you're low in vitamin D, you actually have a decrease in this cell death that's supposed to happen. So managing vitamin D or maintaining normal levels of vitamin D are important. Also, green tea. So green tea extract, EGCG, is a aromatase inhibitor. So that aromatase enzyme I mentioned that converts the testosterone to estrogen, aromatase impacts that enzyme, so helping to lower estrogen levels. And then fiber. I mean, there's different ways of helping to manage estrogen levels, but the protocol he actually uses now is vitamin D and green tea. So those are two things that I'm
Wow.
starting to talk to my patients about.
Um,
Okay.
yeah,
And
that's
that's
incredible.
mhm.
Go ahead, Danette.
Oh no, I'm just saying that that's something that everyone could, for the most part, have access to, and does not appear that it's going to be very expensive.
Mhm.
But it's a simple thing. So, would you recommend that that be taken preventatively, like even without a diagnosis, or or when you're diagnosed to really up your levels? Then,
So I do recommend that we have normal vitamin D, levels. So
okay,
this is controversial because conventionally speaking, we don't typically check vitamin D levels. I think I'm seeing more and more people doing that, but um, supporting your own vitamin D, I think, is important. Now, I don't
okay,
recommend taking vitamin D supplementation without knowing your levels because there are dangers of taking vitamin D and having too high of vitamin D in your blood. But
okay.
I would say speak to your physician about just
Mhm.
making sure that you're getting adequate vitamin D levels just from a natural source. You can get vitamin D from foods too. Um,
Okay.
so that's important. And then in terms of green tea, I mean, I personally drink green tea daily.
Okay.
I think the important takeaway from the green tea and knowing what is it doing and
Hmm.
helping to manage your own estrogen levels, for example. So,
Okay.
maintaining healthy weight, making sure you don't have, too high body fat. Also, making sure that you're having normal bowel movements daily. I recommend my patients, having daily bowel movements because that's one way of making sure that you're managing or maintaining normal estrogen levels. So, getting your fiber in your diet. So, there's just
Hmm.
natural ways of making sure that your hormones are balanced, that you're managing inflammation in the body too. That all can
Hmm.
kind of lead towards this environment that's supportive of fibroid growth.
Okay.
That's great. One quick question. In the study, did he demonstrate that he was able, by supplementation with vitamin D, he was able to transform? And I asked that, transform the fibroids, and I asked that because a lot of research has shown very similarly when it comes to cardiovascular disease in terms of low vitamin D levels and
Hmm.
their relationship to a whole host, everything from COVID all the way through, multiple issues there. And one of the things that's so interesting is that we don't always see the anticipated outcome with supplementation. I still advocate for the supplementation under the right circumstances, like you mentioned. But one of the things it points to for me is whether or not the vitamin D hormone is a surrogate for a deficiency of sunlight, that many of us are sunlight deficient, even if we live in beautiful Florida, California, the
Hmm.
Caribbean, but we're working indoors and in cars all the time and don't get sunlight, which also early morning sunlight and that early light helps trigger that melatonin, the
Hmm.
melatonin stimulating hormone, which helps reset. So there's so multiple factors. It releases it releases nitroglycerin nitrate stores into our skin, help lowering blood pressure and alleviating symptoms. So just curious about the fibroid relationship, if you're aware of that.
I'm not sure. I believe they did show a decrease in the growth. So comparing women
Okay,
that have the fibroids and actually showing a decrease in the size of the fibroids. I think they
wonderful.
did do that. And there have been subsequent studies, I think over 100 studies that have duplicated his results in terms of the vitamin D deficiency. But I think you're right. And I do try to say that to my patients to, try to get at least 10 to 15 minutes of um, sunlight in the morning, kind of in their eyes, just to help, increase their vitamin D levels naturally. So it's important. And unfortunately, many of African Americans are vitamin D deficient. So maybe we're not
Ab-
getting help that we're supposed to.
Absolutely. Well, this is, I think, is the major questions I got bombarded with. I started surveying my sisters and asking people. I was like, asking people, hey, what do you want to know about for women's health? Menopause, menopause. This is the hot topic. All right. So the main event right now, menopause. Tell us, what is menopause?
So, menopause, by definition, is the cessation of menses or your period for 12 months. And it's a clinical diagnosis. It's not typically a diagnosis that we have to make with blood tests, although sometimes you do have to use labs, but it's essentially a clinical diagnosis.
That's good. And so we know that in terms of like the most common symptoms that you encounter from your patients are what? What are the most just disabling symptoms? Now I know, Danette, you're way too young to work to think about this menopause stuff, so you can refer to other people as you comment on this as well.
Yeah, so the most common, obviously, are the hot flashes and the night sweats. Those are have negative impacts on quality of life for women, but also vaginal dryness or atrophy, memory. Sometimes you start to forget little things, insomnia, not sleeping as well. Some
Hmm.
women notice impact on their mood as well. Definitely those that have a history of like anxiety or depression seems to be worse around this transition as well. Um, what else? Those are the main things. Sexual health also can be impacted, apart from hormones, but also from the vaginal atrophy and dryness that happens. So it can lead to discomfort with intercourse, which can then decrease desire, for intercourse as well.
Wow. So what do you do I mean, what should a woman do for that? I mean, that's an awful lot.
It's a lot. So, treatment really depends on what their symptoms are. So, one of the things with menopause, it happens during a time of life where there are a lot of stressful events happening, right? Empty nester, perhaps kids going off to college, um, your parents maybe getting older, just different life stressors. And unfortunately, the stress has a negative impact on the hot flashes. So we get the
Okay.
hot flashes because of the hormonal changes, so the drop in the estrogen and its
Mhm.
impact on brain neurotransmitters, essentially. So affecting our serotonin, which is one of the happy hormones, affecting norepinephrine, which is one of the stress hormones, and leading to a vasoconstriction or constriction of blood vessels. And it essentially narrows a zone that our bodies use to regulate temperature. So you
Okay.
don't have much leeway. If there's a shift in the body temperature, it may shift you into a hot flash. So that's kind of, the theory. And you kind of switch from parasympathetic state, which is the calming aspect of our nervous system, into a more sympathetic state, which also has negative impacts on the heart. So there's increased risk of cardiovascular disease as well during this transition in our life. So the key point that I always recommend is really, again, examining your life and helping to minimize stress, or at least manage your stress better. That's first and foremost. Sleep is also, impacted, but also important in terms of, managing the symptoms. So
Mhm.
trying to improve sleep, and that could be with sleep hygiene, really doing that wind down, say 2 hours before bedtime, starting dimming the lights, cooling the house, turning off all the electronics, things like that. You can try
You mean
doing
no TikTok right before you go to bed?
no, no TikTok, no Instagram, none of that. You just kind of have to shut things off. Maybe a nice book, calming music, some essential oils, or warm bath. So, this stage of our life is a time to really take care of yourself and to nurture yourself. Self care
Mhm.
is huge. Um, Really, I heard it once said, and I think it's true, like treat yourself like you would a toddler. You know how a toddler, you kind of have a nice sleep, structure pattern for them, and you're eating well, all these things. It's time to kind of turn that back on yourself during this phase of your life. And it reminds me of those elderly women that I can recall who just seem to not be phased by anything. They just, right? They're calm, and I kind of use that as inspiration, as I approach those years myself, that you really have to not let things get to you too much, or just really managing your stress. I think is really important. And then of course there's hormones, so that's another topic that is sometimes useful, and there are safe ways of doing that. And I don't know if you want me to go into the bioidentical versus.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
So first, I want to clarify. So bioidentical hormones, it's basically hormones that are structurally similar, the same as our own body's hormones. That's
Okay.
all. That's all that a bioidentical hormone is. Now, when people say bioidentical, they often are referring to compounded bioidenticals, and that's different.
Hmm.
And I won't go into that. They're not FDA approved. Not that I actually have anything against them. I think if in the right hands, they can definitely be a healthy and safe option
Helpful.
for
Mhm.
women.
Okay.
But there are conventional pharmacy FDA approved bioidentical hormones, and those are the ones that we typically use. So things like estradiol, Chimera as a patch,
Mhm.
that can be very helpful for hot flashes. I mean, there's nothing like hormones for hot flashes at the end of the day. And then progesterone. So traditionally, we've used a synthetic progestin, but what we really want to move more towards are the natural progesterone. So there's a progesterone called prometrium that actually comes from peanut oil. So if you have a peanut allergy, you can't use that.
Okay.
But those are the two bioidentical hormones that are typically used more today.
Okay.
I think one of the individuals asked previously if there's a relationship with cancer to the bioidentical hormone replacement and or synthetic.
So there is a link between the synthetic hormone and breast cancer. So the
Hmm.
WHI study, that's the Women's Health Initiative, they did show that there was an increased risk of breast cancer in the arm where women were given the conjugated, so a synthetic estrogen and the progestin. And it was really the progestin that seems to be the problem, because the arm of patients that received only the estrogen, actually there wasn't an increased risk of breast cancer. So it was in the arm that used the estrogen and the synthetic progesterone. And when just looking at, the metabolism of why that is, so the progestin seems to be more inflammatory, and also leads to more production of one of the stronger estrogen metabolites in the liver, um, 16-OH estrone. But that seems to be the issue, whereas the natural progesterone from Metrium actually seems to be protective. The proliferation in the breast. So using the estradiol, which is the bioidentical estrogen, and the prometrium doesn't seem to have an increased risk of breast cancer.
Okay. And then I think also in terms of, are you familiar? I'm sure you are, with pellets that are inserted in butt cheeks. Like, what are your thoughts around those? Is it like just in terms of how the absorption of the hormone, or the bioidentical?
That's a form of the compounding bioidentical hormones, not FDA approved. So the concern with the compounding bioidenticals, that they're not checked for purity, or just their efficacy in general, because they're not FDA approved. But they do have their own regulation, and I've spoken to compounding pharmacists near my home here, and they do follow that. But I don't get involved in the non-FDA. Not that I have anything negative to say,
Sure.
But they're just not FDA approved at this time, and so I just stay away from them.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, let's jump into like some of the other questions and just kind of rapid fire from some of the guests from before. So one question that a caller said was, why do I get fake cramps? Why do I get fake cramps?
Yeah, so I feel this is likely due to, you just don't have enough hormones to quite cause the bleed. So there may still be a little bit of estrogen,
Symptoms.
still a little progesterone. So you're going through kind of the motions, if you will, but there's just not enough growth or proliferation of the lining to then result in a withdrawal bleed from the hormonal conditions. So that's likely what's happening when you feel that.
Okay, and what about the hormones in terms of affecting the breast size, like that they get bigger or smaller? Is that something that is a normal response to premenopausal or menopause?
So I've had patients feel more breast tenderness, and it likely has to do with just the huge swings in the hormones during the phase. Yeah. So one of the first hormones that actually drops when women are going through perimenopause is progesterone. So some women can go through what's called estrogen dominance, where you have more estrogen around versus the amount of progesterone. And so that likely, and estrogen estrogen is more proliferative in terms of like growth. And then you have this swing in the progesterone, and so you're likely just more sensitive to those changes.
Okay. And in terms of the weight gain during this time period, what is that attributed to?
So again, partly from the hormonal changes. When we go through the perimenopause transition, there's actually an increased risk of insulin resistance. So you're having increased insulin leading to, and the lower estrogen too, it modifies how our body distributes fat. And so we have this tendency to have more visceral adipose, or adipose kind of around like central obesity. So unfortunately, kind of move from the like gynecoid body to like an android, which is more like man. And so that's one of the reasons. And then cortisol levels also get involved, and along with the insulin, increasing, blood sugar, and unfortunately depositing our adipose right here centrally. So food and diet is very, very important, all of our life, but definitely during this phase as well, as we're developing this insulin resistance. There's also changes in growth hormone and leptin, which is the hunger, or the hormone that actually tells us that we're full, and ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. So all of these hormones are impacted and sometimes negatively so during this phase. We're very, very sensitive. And then stress, it all plays a role. So again, going back to what I was saying about like lifestyle and like nurturing ourselves and watching what we eat, definitely
Mhm.
important.
Yeah, and just I'm a jump in for a moment here because I think this is so important right here. This point that you're bringing out is this unique interplay between stress and what do we do when we're stressed? We tend to go to desserts, stress spell backwards, right?
Mhm.
We go towards the comfort foods, the processed foods under the weight of stress in our lives. And as you said, we're pressed on both sides of perhaps kids, about adult, aging parents, careers, relationships, and so as a result, now we're having this stress, which accumulates the visceral fat at higher rates inside of women than men too as well. And what that means by visceral fat means it encases the organs. And so what Dr. is describing is the fact that this actually becomes metabolically active and it stimulates not only cancer, but diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular issues that are there. And so
Mhm.
the foods that we eat play such a critical role in this process. And so we talk about fiber and we talk about things that the ultra processed foods that melt in your mouth, not in your hands, they're pre-chewed, right? This stimulates immediately the insulin production, and this begets further issues that are there. Then we eat food substances that produce insulin growth like factors that further promote this. So this becomes an issue of, are we adding to our resiliency? Are we further adding to our stress? Maybe you guys have heard me talk about this. Health equals resiliency divided by stress. And so everything we're doing is adding to either resiliency or stress. And so right now, this critical point of your life, if any of you are in the menopausal or perimenopausal phase, this may lay the foundation for your future of exactly what happens here. That's why I loved your analogy. Treat yourself like a toddler. It means we're going to coddle you. That means we're going to keep you warm. We want to make sure that you're comfortable, that nothing harms you. And that's how we have to treat the women in our lives during this period of time to shelter them. So this is great. This is great.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
This is great. Other questions were about hair drying and shedding.
Oh,
What's going on?
yeah. Again,
I
hormones.
I yeah, I experienced that too. You know.
Yeah, no, definitely hormones play a role, unfortunately. So estrogen is involved with collagen synthesis. So when our estrogen drops, we have less collagen, unfortunately. And then stress also plays a role. Some women, unfortunately, can also develop like a male pattern baldness just from
Mhm.
testosterone fluctuations. And so it's unfortunate, but definitely something that a lot of women, report. Stress also, unfortunately, cortisol is aging for us. So just managing, your stress as well is important too. In women,
Mhm.
not that it's an indication for hormone treatment, but there have been studies looking at our skin and our hair for women that are on estrogen or hormone replacement therapy. And there is definitely a decrease in, sagging skin and dry skin for women that are on hormone replacement therapy. Not that it's an indication to have it, but if you are on it, that's a benefit.
Mhm. Okay.
Wow. 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 Jeanette, any other interesting stuff from your friends at all?
No, I think I asked the questions that we had.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
So, man, this has been incredible. I want you to leave the audience with. I think I have a sense of what you're gonna say, but your top five. Give me your top five. But before you give me your top five, tell me what is your favorite way for you to relax. Your favorite way for you to relax. Your favorite food. You can have any foods. Your last meal. What are you having? I want to know, and I want to know what's your favorite exercise activity before you give us our top five for the listeners out there.
Okay. So my favorite exercise is yoga.
Okay.
That's my absolute favorite. My favorite way of relaxing, gosh, probably going to Hawaii. I love Maui.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm really sad about what happened there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Horrible.
yeah, really bad. Or a massage too. A really good massage can go a long way.
Mhm.
And then my
Yeah.
favorite meal, I love. That's tough. I have three. My healthy self. Mediterranean, Greek food. That's my favorite, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then just in terms of comfort, it's just soul food. Anything soul food, that's my comfort. If I can combine those two. Speaking of which, I do want to say this. I didn't mention this. So, anti-inflammatory diet, Mediterranean diet gets thrown around a
Mm-hmm.
lot, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get an anti-inflammatory diet from any culture. So I do like to promote that. And there is a
Mm-hmm.
website called oldwayspt.org. And so they kind of give some examples of different ways of getting anti-inflammatory diet through different cultures. So I just want to put that out there because,
I
yeah,
love it. I love it. And I would say you can even have anti-inflammatory with soul food. Get some
yes,
collard greens and some turnips and you start add some red beans and some, you start and get
right,
all the mixture of everything that you could want there as well. So for
absolutely.
sure.
No,
You
that's
may not be able to get some of those other things.
right, right. No, that's true. That's true.
All
Um,
right, send us out with your top five. What's your top five recommendations that women should do to take care of themselves for their health?
So, first and foremost, I would definitely implement the 5 pillars of health that I mentioned. So, really looking at your nutrition and knowing that you're doing it for yourself. It's not like you're being told to do this, but really try to adopt it, because it's for your own health. So, nutrition, making sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep every night, exercise, movement, whatever you like to do, just
Mm-hmm.
implement that and prioritize that. We may have plans on exercising, but oh, this happens. No, this needs to be scheduled and prioritized for yourself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Develop a spiritual practice or a purpose in your life, I think is very important. And then a community. Make sure you have a healthy community around you. There's a term or phrase, tend and befriend, which has been found to be very helpful for women, especially. It's one of our ways of being resilient. Get together with your girlfriends. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really healthy for us to do that. Um, and I think those are kind of were basically 5 things that I would recommend to everyone. And then the one thing I would also say is be an advocate for yourself. Healthcare today, um, I think there's some challenges with it, and so
Mm-hmm.
it can be a little difficult sometimes to get the care that you need. But don't be afraid
Yeah.
to advocate for yourself. And if you say something you don't think you were heard, say it again. It's so important, and know your history, know your family's history, so that you know
Mm-hmm.
which type of screening you should have for breast cancer, for example. And when it comes to menopause symptoms, you don't have to suffer. So whatever you're dealing with, it isn't just something you have to suffer with. Be seen, let us know what's happening, so that we can provide treatment options for you. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Porter.
you're
Yes,
welcome.
yes, yes. I love it. I love it. Tell people where they can find you. Where can they find you online, on social media, your website?
So my website is Shanae, or actually it's at drshanae.com.
Okay.
And then I also have an Instagram with the same handle. So it's Dr.
Okay.
And that's my
Love
web.
it. Love it. So you all get out there, like her page, follow her, go to her site. You have a book coming out?
Not yet, but
Not
definitely
yet. All right. That's on. So
here.
we but
But
go to her website and sign up and so forth and stay connected. Stay connected. Listen, folks, we've heard right now today some wonderful content, some information and tools that will help save your breasts, that will help keep you cool in menopause. And I'll tell you what, the nuggets she dropped will actually help preserve your heart. It's going to heal a stressed and broken heart. You know what my motto is, right? You got to get selfish. All right. It's a cure for a stressed and broken heart. And so what I'm hearing today is that selfish not is not only a cure for a stressed and broken heart, it's a cure for breast cancer. It's a cure for alleviating hot flashes too as well. So remember to like this broadcast, share it with someone out there who's in need, and stay tuned for future episodes. Take
Okay.
care.
Fantastic.
yeah.
Thank you.